There's that saying that you can't pour from an empty cup,
Yeah.
right? So if you're not filling yourself up, how can you expect to help somebody
Parent
else?
or being
Or
the
more,
caregiver of someone with type 1 diabetes, of like their life is in your hands. You come very last. Like your mental health, your own struggles goes at the very bottom
but try to be 1% better instead of trying to fix everything at
care.
once. Because when you
Self-care doesn't always mean having a spa day or something grand. Hey, Palmr fam, I'm Rebecca,
and I'm Nick.
and welcome back to another episode of the Urgent Lows with Palmr, where we talk about lifestyle and type 1 diabetes.
Here, we believe in embracing self-care through life's challenges. So today, our topic is all on mental health and how it relates to self-care and, more importantly, self-care without guilt.
Yeah, I think it's really about asking that question of how are you really doing is super important.
Yeah, because I know so often we like to hide what we're going through. And it's not until somebody else points it out that we actually even realize the funk that we might be in.
Yeah.
And it was actually interesting because this week there was somebody that we both truly care about. And we could tell for a while this person was struggling. And we just felt like we need to have a sit down with them and say, hey, are you okay?
Mhm.
Because you don't look like you're okay right now.
And I think with this situation that we went through, it was so powerful because a 360 experience for me, because as I'm talking to this person and checking in with them, like, how are you really doing? I felt like I was talking to myself 4 years ago. And it was super powerful and brought a lot of emotions, to be honest. Like, I got emotional having the conversation because so many of the things that were being said and a lot of like the challenges they were dealing with were exactly the same things I struggled with. And it really made me realize that, depression can look super different and anxiety can look super different for everyone. And not everyone has the same mental health struggle story, but a lot of it is so similar. There are so many things that you can relate to of how, feeling bad, things that are keeping you, holding you back, that it's just, wow, it's not really that different. Like what you're going through and what I went through is not really that different.
And it's great because for your personal brand and what you're really wanting to do on that side of the business, it really is about this mental health and helping people realize that, hey, you might be stuck. There's something going on
Mm.
and it's time to pivot, right? Are you doing what you should be doing? Why are you stuck right now? It was amazing to just watch you talk to this person and guide them, give them advice, and hopefully help them move in the right direction and make the changes that we know they need. But it really starts with, does this person want to make the changes?
Yeah. And I think too, we come from a generation of parents where mental health, depression, anxiety, speaking with a therapist was kind of like voodoo. Like, first of all, we don't talk about it. Like, what are you doing? Like, it didn't almost exist. And I really realized when I was having this conversation with this person of like how grateful, and I told you after we had the conversation, like how grateful I am to have the support system that I have and that I did have when I was really struggling because as I mentioned before, mental health struggles run in my family. My mom has gone through it. She has had family members have gone through it. So I really feel because I have such a close connection to it. And as I'm talking about it right now, I always remember me thinking of like this side of my family that, we deal with mental health struggle. It's such a negative thing. Like I wish we didn't have it. Like I wish it wasn't a part of us. But it's actually something so amazing that we actually do have within us, because I feel like each family member has been able to help the next family member with what they're going through. And I literally thank my lucky stars every day that my mom went through her mental health struggles when she went through them, so that when I went through them, she was there as my support. She was able to make me realize that there was, a light at the end of the tunnel. There was a whole other side of this. Like, I am able to go through it, and almost being able to be like, hey, I went through this and I am living proof that you can make it out of this is
Mhm.
huge.
Definitely. And so it doesn't really matter if you are a single person, young professional, a caregiver, a parent, no matter what age,
Mhm.
self care and your mental health is so important. And so, why why does mental health really matter to you?
It matters to me because I feel like it doesn't define me, but it has been a part of me. And I've realized after I went through 4 years ago what I went through and I had to pivot my entire life, that I really realized that it's not such a negative thing. I always thought, like, what are people gonna think if I really come out there and say, I was in a depression then. That's why I had to leave this job. That's why it wasn't fulfilling me. That's why I had to leave this career. Like, that was something that I could never admit to that. And I had this mindset of if I did admit to it, I would be weak. Versus now when I look at it, hindsight's 2020, but it's no, that actually makes me super strong. That I'm actually able to talk about it, able to realize what I was going through, and now I even had this conversation with you a few weeks ago of like, even in the situation of our life, our blended family, 2 kids with type 1 diabetes. I have so much anxiety, and I'm even like, I wonder why God put me in this situation of such a high anxiety person into this family life that is chaotic at times, right? And you answered it so beautifully because you said, well, I think God's working through you right now because you're going to be able to share your story and people are going to be able to relate to your story. And then you're going to eventually, without even knowing it, you're helping people. And that was huge for me to actually realize and take a step back and be like, wow, no, you're actually right. Because I remember when I was really deep into my depression, yes, I had my mom, yes, I had my family, yes, I had my siblings, but I wanted someone, like, close to my age, close to somebody that I could, like, really super relate to and just be like, "Hey, like, I gone through everything you're going through, like, you can make it out. You can do this." And that's why I feel so passionate of being an advocate on my social media and any platforms that are coming in the future of even if my story doesn't sound like your story, if you can find something in my story that you can relate to me, that's a win. And that's what really motivates me to keep doing what I'm doing.
Definitely. And I feel that from a, let's say, a Christianity standpoint, one of the things that I truly believe, because people say, like, whatever you end up believing in, right? But people are saying, like, why is it that bad things seem to always happen to good people? And I truly believe it's because those people were meant to do something greater down the road.
Yeah.
And the only way that you can truly help somebody is if you're in those shoes. So think about a drug addict, right? Someone who's overcome a drug addiction would then be able to help somebody who is then dealing with it better than somebody who's never dealt with it, right? Because you can't connect with it. And that's where I think truly you are right now is that because you went through what you did, you're able to come out the other side and actually really coach people and help people and encourage people because you actually understand what they're going through.
Yeah.
And you really can't help somebody unless you truly have gone through it. And that's where you're at right now. And it's amazing to see what you do, but it's also why it is so important, this topic for us, for both of us really, and why it's been part of the mission for Palmer, because I know with me, especially this last year, I dealt with a lot of burnout, a lot of fatigue,
Mm.
just making bad decisions when it comes to my health and everything, like not working out, not eating properly, right? We all have those like coping mechanisms and everything, but it is so important at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think even to hone in on what you were saying and what I was saying before, even if my story doesn't directly relate to you, there's things that you can find. So I remember at the beginning of becoming a stepmom and having like some pushback from Evie, I'm like, this is just never going to work out. Like, like I don't know how to relate to Evie because I don't come from a divorce family. Like, my parents are still together, like, we're very close knit, like, I don't come from that. But I've come to realize over the years of like, no, I actually have a lot that I can relate to with Evie and a lot that I can help her with certain situations and talk through situations with her. And even being a person of being like, hey, if this is something that you don't feel comfortable talking to daddy about, like, you can always talk to me about it. And I think that that's opened such a great communication between the two of us of being able like, she also knows that, like, she can talk to me about certain things. It doesn't matter if I don't even know what it is or if I've never gone through it. I don't have type 1 diabetes. That's, like, a huge thing that I don't have that they do have, but, I can relate to it, and especially if I can relate to it as a caregiver, you know?
Being there to help people and support them and understand, even if you don't know what it is, even from the type 1 diabetes world, when you find out somebody is going through, like maybe their child just became a diabetic, or it could be any really disease at the end of the day, what those people go through from a mental standpoint
Mhm.
can only really be described for someone who's gone through it.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy that honestly how much your mind can be affected
Yeah.
by some of this stuff at the end of the day. And it doesn't make you weaker at all or not strong. Like, it's just one of those things that when you don't take care of your mental health, you don't do things for yourself. It doesn't matter how strong you actually really are,
Mhm.
you're going to struggle and your mind's not going to be there.
Yeah. And I really think with like a chronic illness like type 1 diabetes, you get in this mindset of being the parent or being the caregiver of someone with type 1 diabetes of like their life is in your hands.
Mhm.
You come very last. Like your mental health, your own struggles goes at the very bottom of the pile. And type 1 diabetes and them come very first, which in reality, yes, like when you have the kids and there's type 1 diabetes involved, like, and they're at ages where, they're still not managing it on their own, like, yes, their life is basically in your hands 24/7. But it's also realizing I'm not going to be able to pour into Parker and Evie's diabetes if I have nothing to give, if I'm completely burned out, if I am working on few hours of sleep. It's just not going to be helpful for anybody in the situation because most likely how if I'm burned out, if I'm super tired, I am anxious and I'm worried. And it's just that like feeling that I have. And then I bring that into the type 1 diabetes and that doesn't help the kids. That then they feed off of how you're handling it and they become anxious about their type 1 diabetes. And then, they feel bad because, oh, daddy in fact didn't get sleep or whatever the case may be. It then pours into them, and then you just have to realize of like, wow, how much it all starts and ends with your mental health.
Yes. And you just said perfectly, right? There's that saying that you can't pour from an empty cup,
Yeah.
right? So if you're not filling yourself up, how can you expect to help somebody else? Or more importantly, be there for your family or your loved ones or a friend,
Mhm.
right? And so one of the things that we wrote down here is what are some of the signs that either you might be struggling with your mental health or be on the lookout for some friends or loved ones that might be dealing with some type of issue right now. And so we kind of broke it down into three categories. The first one being physical signs, because you've said it a lot. You realize when you're struggling, is your body is your first sign.
Yeah. My body shuts down basically. And like I've mentioned before, I got shingles at 30 years old. Like, just my body is the best indication of what's going on and if I need to stop and take a break or if I can keep moving forward.
Definitely. And so the first one is actually constant fatigue.
Mhm.
And I think that's a really big one, especially if you're parents. Like, yes, you're always going to have some type of fatigue. It's that we call it parenting tiredness, right?
Yeah.
Um, but there's a difference between that and your body just being completely tired and shut down. And all you want to do is sleep and not do anything, right? So, constant fatigue is a big one. The next one is actually, a change in appetite and sleeping,
Mhm.
right? Like, you end up not sleeping as well, you're not either hungry or you wanna only eat junk food or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then the last one we wrote down for physical signs is actually frequent headaches and stomach issues.
Which when you think of stomach issues, do you not just think of me? I tend to always have a upset tummy, which I've explained in our first episode of this year that I have made 2025 a year of my health overall. And I started working with a nutritionist in late 2024. And it's just been amazing to like figure out so much about your body and about your stomach and just everything that goes into it and what can be like happening in your insides that you have no idea about. So yes, I stomach issues would definitely be at the top of my list because when I'm nervous or I'm anxious or I'm not doing well, it all goes to my tummy.
So the next one is actually emotional signs, and it's funny because when I look through this, I realize this is actually the area that I feel like I struggle the most. And when I see, like, okay, I'm at my breaking point, right? I'm having the burnout. And so it starts with feeling overwhelmed by small tasks.
Mhm.
Is that not me?
Yes. It
Yes.
really, really much is you.
Because I'm already doing so much, trying to deal with running a business, being a husband, kids with type 1 diabetes, life in general. And I just get completely overwhelmed
Yeah.
sometimes, and even the smallest tasks, it just feels like too much.
Yeah, and I think when you're approaching your burnout, like these small tasks, you like can't figure them out, and then you try to take this literal sense of it, and it's like, what are you doing? Like, it's just this simple thing of go take the trash out. But
Mhm.
then it's like, you like in your mind, you start building this thing up, and it becomes so big and daunting for you. So, yes, definitely that is something that you struggle with.
Yes, and next one being increase irritability and mood swings.
Yes.
Definitely got some mood swings at times. And the last one being feeling disconnected from loved ones, right?
Yeah.
And I know that when you don't feel good about yourself, it's really hard to love others
Mhm.
or even want to be around people who care about you.
Yeah, and I think too with us and our relationship, when you're reaching that point of burnout, you get very quiet and you get very reserved and you're just in your head and in your mind that I'm always asking like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And you're like,
Mhm.
"Nothing's wrong. Nothing is wrong." And finally after like the third time of me asking you what's wrong, you're like, "Why do you keep asking me what's wrong?" And I'm like, "Well, you're just sitting here in silence." And you're like, "Oh, I didn't even realize I was just sitting here in silence because 'cause I'm here with my thoughts." So I'm thinking I'm having all these conversations, but no, in reality, you're not saying anything to me.
Yeah. Um, and then the last one is actually behavioral signs. And so a big one is avoiding responsibilities. And that could be your job, it could be, parenting, managing your diabetes, all of that. And so that's a really important one is when you just don't want to deal with anything anymore. Turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms. And this could be anything from overeating, excess screen time, anything like that, right? Like people always cope in different ways.
Mhm.
Alcohol, for example, or drugs, you just always seem to try to find your happiness through something else,
Yeah.
which really just makes you even more brain dead at the end of the days. And then last one is, and I feel like I struggle with this at times, is starting to neglect my hobbies or things that really just kind of bring you joy.
Yeah.
I know when I'm struggling, I'm not looking to do the things that I love, right? It's
Mhm.
just like, oh, I just got to focus on all these other things, and I never give myself a break.
Yeah, and I feel for me, I really enjoy going on date nights with you and getting dressed up and, just enjoying our time together. And I know when I'm really struggling is when, like, the idea of having to do my hair, do my makeup, get dressed, pick out an outfit is so daunting to me. I'm like, I'm struggling right now because the things that usually excite me are like seeming really just not something I want to be doing.
Yeah. And so hopefully some of these signs have made you more aware of, and then listen, we're all going to deal with them a little bit at a time, but it's that constant, if it's always kind of showing up, right? And if you are worried that maybe you are dealing with some of this stuff, talk to somebody. That is the most important thing. And it can start with a close friend or somebody who just really knows you well and say, hey, I feel like I'm kind of struggling with something. What are you seeing? Are you seeing this in me? Right. And from there, maybe you do start talking to a therapist or somebody like that.
So, how I've mentioned before, I've dealt with burnout and depression and anxiety. So, some tips that I really feel that helped me, I feel can be used in any situation. And I wanted to share them with you all because if there's something that you can take from this, that's a win for us. So, tip number one is a daily check in with yourself. And I always know that when I am on the go and I am busy and I'm anxious and I have so much to do and all these things are daunting to me, I don't check in with myself. I check in with myself when my body has the shingles or when I can't even get out of bed. That's when I'm starting to realize, like, oh, something is going on. But I've realized taking that time in your day at the beginning of your day of how to check in with yourself and ask yourself, like, how are you doing today? What can you take on today? What are you going to be able to accomplish today? And what are things that you're just not going to be able, you don't have the bandwidth to do it today? It being okay with that, I think, has been huge for me. And I also know you've done it as well.
Yeah. And one, if there's one piece of advice I can really give with that is when you do your check-in, do it at a time where you don't have distractions. I know for me, my favorite time to do it is when I'm in the car driving somewhere by myself, right? Maybe I just dropped the kids off at school and I'm driving to the office, but you're in the car, you're in silence, you can or you can put music on, but it just gives you time to really yeah, check in. How are you doing? What is going on in your life?
I think that tip number two is creating micro moments for yourself that involve self care. Self care doesn't always mean having a spa day or something grand, which spa days, don't get me wrong, are one of my favorites, but it doesn't have to be something huge. So I think realizing that, and I have come to the point of when I know I'm getting super anxious about something or, there's just a stressful situation, even if I go outside in our backyard and I feel the sun on my face, that's huge for me. And that's a moment where I took a mental break for myself. And even yesterday, for example, we're in the middle of packing up our house because it's under construction and all these things, and we had a dinner later on yesterday, and I said to Nick, I was like, "Hey, I am going to take a 30-minute breather," and I ended up falling asleep for like 15 minutes, and it was huge. I was able to get up, I felt good, I got ready for dinner, and I accomplished the night, and it helped me. And I know that I struggled with feeling guilty, especially with like naps. And like, I know that I had this struggle, especially during the beginning of our relationship, of like, I really like to sleep, and I thought, like, if I admitted how much I like to sleep to Nick, he's gonna think, like, I'm just a loser who just likes to sleep, and it's really not that. It's just I've learned that I need a lot of sleep, and I function well when I have a good amount of sleep for my body. The amount of sleep that Nick gets is not gonna work for me, and that's okay. We're 2 different people.
Yes. And one of the things that my one of my coaches taught me, and it's always a struggle because I'm someone when I start working, I get in the zone, I just go, 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 and I forget there's even lunch and all this stuff, right? And so one of the things that he wanted me to do, and there's these little cube things that I bought, is that set up all your time in like 30-minute increments, but you work nonstop, focusing on one thing for 25 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break.
Mhm.
And this little cube thing will actually remind me because again, the alarm beeps, I stop, get up, stretch, maybe walk outside, do a quick 5-minute walk, come back in, and then you're ready to go for the next 25 minutes.
Mhm.
Those really help a lot.
And then tip number 3 would be setting realistic boundaries, which is game changer in any situation. We just had one this morning that, we had plans to do certain things starting from the very early morning hours. And Nick woke up before me and then he kind of like checked in with me and he's like, "How are you feeling?" And I'm like, "My body just feels exhausted." And realistically, so like I have a reason to feel exhausted? And he was like, "All right, I'm going to actually go and I'm going to start doing these things that I need to get done. And you wake up when you want to wake up and when you feel good. And then we'll reconvene then." And that was so amazing because it took away that guilt of, like,
Mhm.
being like, "Oh, I'm letting him down because I still need to sleep a few more hours than he did." Like, no, you shouldn't have to feel the guilt, and I think that's when you start implementing the realistic boundaries of, like and this goes back to checking in with yourself, like, "Can I be taking this on right now?" If the answer is no, then don't do it, because I know that when I was in my depression and anxiety, when it was the height of it, I would hate to let somebody down. So if somebody asked me to do something and I really knew I didn't want to do it or I couldn't even take it on, I'd be like, "Yeah, maybe. I'll let you know in a few days." And then it's that like then I had that daunting experience of like, "Oh, I have this timeline. I need to check in with them again." And I still don't want to do the thing that I said maybe to. And then you feel like you're letting them down and it's like you're creating that situation for yourself when you're not putting up realistic boundaries.
Yeah, and it is so important to know how to say no without feeling guilty. And I think that's the biggest part of boundaries. But also, most of the time we hear about boundaries and it has to do with other people. But boundaries isn't just about what's going on with other people. You need to set boundaries on what you're also doing. And so we're in a day and age where social media is so huge. There's nothing wrong with social media, but too many people get on social media and they have no boundaries and they just scroll for hours and then their life gets sucked away and they're like, where did the day go? Right. And that's a huge one that I don't think people actually even think about.
Yeah, and I think when we first started with Palmer and the idea of Palmer, like, we really wanted us to be having our message out there on Instagram and utilizing Instagram. And then now we're utilizing YouTube with this podcast. And I know one of my fears was like, what are people going to say about us? What are the comments going to be? Are these comments going to like destroy me and ruin me? And I've come to like this point with us getting comments that are not the nicest at times. And it's like, let them. Like, let
Yeah.
them say what they're gonna say. There's always gonna be an opinion out there, and people are always gonna have different opinions. And some people are gonna want to express them hiding behind a keyboard. Let them do that. You know what I mean? But that at the end of the day doesn't affect who you are to a person because you are still that same person. All right, tip number 4, and I've talked about this in the past, is really leaning on your support system. I've expressed how much I'm so grateful that I had the family I have that helped me with my anxiety, basically had an intervention with me when I was at the height of my depression and anxiety and came to me of being like, "Hey, we love you. We know you and you're not doing well." And that's huge. And I always urge someone that even if, let's say, you have a situation where you don't feel like your family would understand you, or maybe go to a friend that you feel like you can relate to. And even if that's not an option, like try to find like a therapist you could speak to. But even if that's not something financially capable that you're able to do, the Bible. And I love the daily devotional app that Nick actually got me into when we first started dating. And it's just reading daily devotionals in real life terms and being able to understand it. And then after the daily devotional, it gives you a passage in the Bible that you can go back to and you can learn more about. And I also feel like the Bible and your religion and growing your faith is huge and it's something free that you can do.
And the devotional that she is talking about is called Jesus Calling. I highly recommend it. It is fantastic. It's very short. So,
Yes, it's been amazing. So, lastly, Nick, I think the tip number 5 is seek professional help when needed. And that has been huge. Like we've talked many episodes, our therapist individually and our couples therapist has been a game changer for us. And with that, letting go of the voodoo behind it. Let it go of this persona that it makes you weak, or you have problems in your relationship because you go to a couples therapist. Like, that's not what it is. Like, life is going to happen and you're going to have to say for yourself, like, what's going to help you right now? And what do you need right now in this certain situation?
Definitely. Those are some great tips. I know a big thing that I struggle with is just the whole I don't have time, right? I get so busy and I forget about myself and I just throw it out. And so I really just want to kind of encourage people of this is so important. At the end of the day, it's so important. You need to get in there and make it a priority. Everybody's a little bit different, but the biggest thing I can say is make small improvements every day. We say this a lot at work, but try to be 1% better instead of trying to fix everything at once. Because when you do try to fix everything at once, it feels too overwhelming. So I just think that's so important because when you don't take care of it, you deal with burnout and everything around you falls apart.
Yeah, and in all reality, it starts to snowball, and then that's actually holding you back versus pushing you forward and moving forward. When in reality, when you're in it, you're like, oh, I just need to push through to get to the other side. But you don't see that you're getting held back and you're not getting to the other side.
Another great episode, Rebecca. I'm so excited. It's so important because self care isn't selfish and it's something we all need to focus on. But you know what else is also self care?
Shopping at Palmer.
Resort wear, because resort wear is self care.
Yep. And we always love to talk about wearing your self-care, and that's where our clothes come into play because we really want you to put one of our garments on and feel happy and feel good and feel energetic and the bright colors and the palm trees and think about your favorite resort on an island. That's really our goal.
We really just want to use our clothes to transport you to another location, go on a vacation, and feel good about yourself. So, thank you so much for tuning in. This was a great time, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And more importantly, got a lot out of it.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye, Palmer fam.
Bye.